What's up, Mustangs? It's Miss Hibbard coming at you with your slides about environmental changes. Luckily, we're also going to be joined by Miss Malone and Miss Gaffney throughout this slideshow, giving you some information. So hopefully by now you have printed out or set up in your notebook your Cornell Notes page. There was a little link in the Blend page about that. We're going to be answering three main questions in your Cornell Notes. And so if you have that notes page printed out, or if you have it in your notebook, you'll be ready to take your notes.
Hey, it's Miss Malone here to introduce you to environmental changes. So, what are environmental changes? Environmental changes occur because of disturbances to the environment. So, those environmental changes can be positive, they can be beneficial, they can be negative, harmful, or neutral and have no effect to the environment at all. Environmental changes can have short term effects. So, in the environment, you'd see those changes almost immediately, or more of a long term effect, so over an extended period of time. Environmental changes can be caused by humans, so things like oil spills, the BP disaster, urbanization, the building of cities, or by natural processes, so things like floods, hurricanes, droughts. Environmental changes can affect the survival of an individual organism, so one organism, or an entire species or population could be affected. So that's a short introduction into environmental changes. Goodbye for now.
Hi, Miss Gaffney here. So I'm going to be talking to you about the different types of environmental changes. There are two types. There's short-term environmental change and long-term environmental change. So we're going to start with a short-term environmental change. That's an environmental change that occurs quickly and affects organisms immediately. Short-term environmental changes could include things like droughts, floods, fire. They do not give populations time to adapt to the change. They force them to move or even become extinct. So if we look at our examples here, these changes, they are temporary. The change lasts for a short period of time. It creates a very sudden impact on the populations. They do not have enough time to adapt to this change. However, the environment recovers fairly quickly. So what I mean by quickly, maybe that environment can bounce back within a few months to even like a few decades. Now, I know a few decades may not seem quickly, but in the big scheme of things, a few decades is actually a pretty short amount of time for an environment to bounce back. Let's look at some examples of short-term environmental changes. Here we have hurricanes, blizzard, oil spill, forest fires, commercial fishing. Now I want to go back to the slide that Miss Malone shared where she talked about that an environmental change can be caused by humans or it can be a natural cause, a natural disturbance. So if we look at our examples, something like a hurricane, blizzard, tornado, volcanic eruption, those would be natural causes. Now you might be thinking, what about a forest fire? Well, a forest fire could be a natural cause or it could be a human cause. Oil spill, commercial fishing, also known as overfishing, those would be human caused. And then others that we might think of might be something like a drought, tornado, flood. Those are a few more examples of a short-term environmental change where there's a sudden impact to the population. They do not have enough time to adapt. However, the ecosystem can bounce back fairly quickly.
Hey, it's Miss Hibbard back to tell you about long-term changes. So long-term changes are going to be gradual changes. And when I'm talking gradual and long-term, I'm talking about dozens, hundreds, thousands, even millions of years. These changes cause a chain reaction of effects, and I'll give you some examples of those on the next slide. The thing about a gradual change, though, is that it allows a population to adapt. So because it's taking so long, organisms can change over many generations. However, some populations may not recover and they could potentially become extinct. So let's talk about some of these examples. The first example I want to talk about is plate tectonics. This is a naturally occurring long-term change, and I want you to think about our friend Alfred Wegener. Remember that he discovered coal in Antarctica, which means that Antarctica at one point in time was in a different latitude than it is today. It was in a warmer area, and so plants were able to grow. As the plates shifted over hundreds of millions of years, the plants in Antarctica were no longer able to grow, and so they eventually died off and became extinct, those particular plants. But we can still find their fossils and the coal that they left behind there in Antarctica. So in addition to plate tectonics, we also have human-caused long-term changes. Climate change and plastic pollution are two of those changes. They're happening over a long period of time, and they're making gradual changes to our planet that may or may not be able to be reversed. With climate change, the global temperature is getting warmer, and one example of an effect of that is that the sea ice in the Arctic and the North Pole is going away. So the polar bears who use that sea ice to travel and to hunt, they're having a problem. And so they're going to either need to adapt these changes, maybe find a new way to travel, a new way to hunt, a new thing to eat, or they might die off and become extinct. With regards to plastic pollution, when marine life is eating this plastic, it's dying, so certain organisms could be killed off because of that. Also, certain microorganisms are not able to get the oxygen they need, and so they're dying off as well. And a lot of those organisms are the base of the food chain for larger organisms in the ocean. Another example of the chain reaction of effects that could be happening due to climate change, for example, is if spring is happening earlier in the year, then trees might bloom earlier in the year, and that could change migration patterns of birds. It could change when insects hatch, and that again has chain reactions throughout the food web. So when we have these gradual changes, whether they're naturally occurring or human caused, it's going to make animals, plants, and other organisms adapt or possibly even go extinct. So it's a pretty big deal. That's basically the end of our slideshow for environmental changes, and I hope you have a great day.